This article appeared on Popular Mechanics, one of my favorite magazines. Let's read this article to learn English. Your brain's scaffolding could collapse, and it may radically alter the way you think. A landmark study suggests that this daily habit may reshape how your mind activates. By Susan Leahy, published February 4th, 2026. The brain works like a muscle. Thinking, learning, and practicing a skill literally causes structural adaptations in our brains. For instance, the brain works like a muscle. Thinking, learning, and practicing a skill literally causes structural adaptations in our brains. For example, scientists examining musicians and non-musicians' brains could actually tell the difference just by looking at key measurements of healthy brain function, like gray matter density and white matter integrity. When you work your brain hard, such as when you are learning to play an instrument, you recruit a lot of neurons to build connections and construct a scaffolding for that new skill. Such scaffolds aren't built in a day, but they do become more efficient over time. The more you practice, the fewer neurons you have to recruit to execute the same activities, so it gets easier. But what happens if you outsource that mental effort to an AI? A 2025 preprint study from MIT, which has not yet been peer reviewed, tested the impact of large language models on the brain by having subjects write essays. They divided the study participants between groups using their brains only, those using a search tool, and those using chatgpt. With the participants were working, researchers used electroencephalography (EEG) to measure their brain activity, connectivity, and cognitive load, or how much heavy lifting the brain was doing. Right? Good expressions. How much heavy lifting the brain was doing. The people who were using only their brains showed much more brain activity, with many more neuronal connections and much greater cognitive load than those using ChatGPT. In the brain-only group, the parts of the brain that are associated with mental effort and concentration were lit up. Lit up. The brain-only group was concentrating because they had to decide what they wanted to say, figure out arguments for their position, and structure their logic using good grammar and syntax. Whereas in the ChatGPT group, the LLM handled these demands for users, although evaluators did say the arguments were vague and lacked personal insight. Still, ChatGPT carried a lot of cognitive load. Cognitive load. Poppy Crumb, PhD, good name, right? Poppy Crumb is a neuroscientist and adjunct professor at Stanford University who was not involved in the recent study. She explains that there are three different kinds of cognitive load. One, extraneous cognitive load. It's like your brain having to deal with the noise in the coffee shop. It makes your brain work harder, but not in a way that helps you complete a task. Two, intrinsic cognitive load has to do with inherent complexity of a subject. You will have a greater intrinsic cognitive load trying to explain a principle of theoretical physics than trying to explain simple addition. 3. Intrinsic cognitive load has to do with, let me go over these one more time. Extraneous cognitive load is like your brain having to deal with the noise in the coffee shop. It makes your brain work harder, but not in a way that helps you complete a task. Okay. 2. Intrinsic cognitive load has to do with inherent complexity of a subject. You will have a greater intrinsic cognitive load trying to explain a principle of theoretical physics than trying to explain simple addition. 3. Germaine cognitive load is the work your brain has to do to accomplish a task. These may include navigating the intrinsic cognitive load, or you may outsource some of the complex thinking to an AI in order to focus on a different aspect of the task, like using an algorithm to calculate data that supports your argument in a thesis paper. So germaine, right? We heard the word oftentimes, germaine, native, friendly, right? Germaine cognitive load. So I'll look up the word later. Germaine, or it appears again. So we go back and look up the word germaine. Pertinent, relevant, connected, closely related, archaic. Germaine is the chemical compound with the formula GH4 and the germanium analog of methane. Germaine. German, right? Germaine. Probably it has something to do with German. I heard that Germans are very friendly with each other, unlike their facial expressions. So the word germaine comes from German because it's friendly, pertinent, closely related. So I'll go back. Germaine cognitive load, Crum says, is what builds the mental scaffolding that allows for critical thought and decision making. If you outsource it, you don't have the infrastructure that helps you navigate tasks and questions. If I talk to a cybersecurity company or a doctor or attorney who is using AI, they may get to the same conclusions, maybe even faster than they used to, Crum says. But the assumption that they have the same depth of deductive reasoning and ability to take that information and make good decisions with it, it's not there. But even greater issues are at stake with outsourcing our brains. Working the brain hard makes it strong and resilient. Using AI does not. There's a structure in the brain called the anterior mid cingulate cortex, amcc, that is associated with tenacity, right? Nested near the center of the brain, the amcc is connected with functions including pain management, emotional regulation, and decision making. When you're taking on a really challenging task and persevere, you build your amcc. Researchers have found that if you develop this part of your brain by doing difficult things, you empower yourself to overcome challenges more easily. Because this part of the brain impacts motivation, you are more likely to succeed when tackling challenging goals and less likely to get depressed. And as you age, you are more likely to be what is known as a super ager, someone with the mental capacity of younger peers. The bottom line is you have to do the work, says neuroscientist Lara Boyd, PhD, in a TED Talk. My research has shown that increased difficulty, increased struggle, if you will, during practice actually leads to both more learning and greater structural change in the brain. So does that mean we should never use AI? No. Most of us, for example, don't really want to try to memorize all our passwords. While it would be a good brain exercise, we would probably rather use that effort for something more interesting. Chrome is a big proponent of using technology to enhance human performance, not supplement it. She argues that we have to be selective about our use of technology. We have to acknowledge the trade-offs and make them consciously. If we use a GPS for navigation, we probably won't get lost and may even arrive at our destination earlier. But if for some reason that GPS stopped working, we might be in a pickle, right? We might be in a pickle. We might be in a pickle. Pickle is nice to eat, but it's acidic and smells terrible sometimes. So we might be in a pickle. We have to put thought into where we want to build our own scaffolding and where our purposes are better served by relying on the technology. Or do we? There is a popular argument that we should just go ahead and rely on AI the same way we've relied on calculators. After all, if you are designing room addition, you are probably not going to be doing your own long division to find the precise measurement of each floorboard. One study pointed out the difference. A calculator just does the calculation. In the room addition example, a calculator won't tell you how to design the room for functionality, feng shui, or your own personal taste. And it certainly won't explain how to calculate the area to purchase materials. You still have to use your brain for that, but AI can research it all for you. Every step of the way, it can supplement your brain, which could be a cause for concern. Natalia Kosmina, PhD, a researcher at MIT Media Lab's Fluid Interfaces Group, and a visiting faculty researcher at Google, was the lead scientist on the recent MIT study. She noted that using LLMs resulted in a remarkable homogeneity of essays. The homogeneity was very surprising because some of the participants were not native English speakers, so they put their prompts into chatgpt, not in English, but in other languages like Spanish. Cosmania says, we saw this in the data that the assets would be so similar to each other. And since then, we saw multiple papers talking about this exact phenomenon about homogenization, very similar language, similar vocabulary used. After all, LLMs are just probability machines. They may pick the logic that's most likely to be correct, but they have no personal experience or insights. A second surprising observation concerned ownership. 16% of the LLM users said that they felt zero ownership toward their papers. A lot of people commented on this, more significantly saying, well, they haven't written it. Kasminia explains. The other participants in the study described how much more ownership with the brain only group feeling the most. This is worth more research, according to Cosminia. When asked about her personal thoughts on where this might lead, she wondered aloud whether ownership equates with caring. Could that mean that widespread use of LLMs results in an epidemic of apathy? It brings in a bigger question of what it would mean for education, what it would mean potentially for the workspaces and for our department beyond this study. Would you not care? And if you don't care, what could be the repercussions of that? Her concern is that indifference would translate into lack of human dignity, a failure to see our humanity clearly. It will still be some time before we have the full picture of how AI has impacted humanity. But one thing's for certain, it's something only humans can figure out. So we gotta be careful. We need to build our scaffolding of a brain by thinking hard, not relying entirely on ChatGPT or a search engine, right? It fires amcc, and amcc makes you a super agent who has the same mentality as a young man. So we should practice brain using, right? And let's look up the word that I try to remember. How much heavy lifting the brain was doing, how much heavy lifting the brain was doing, how much heavy lifting the brain was doing, right? Lead up, germaine. We might be in a pickle, germaine. How much heavy lifting the brain was doing, how much heavy lifting the brain was doing. We might be in a pickle, germaine cognitive load. How much heavy lifting the brain was doing, right? We might be in a pickle. Well, that's it. Thanks for listening. Have a great Wednesday.